This video is supported by our beautiful patrons over at patreon.com/NerdSync. How are you doing, you wonderful nerd? As I'm sure you've noticed, we're in the midst of a kind of superhero renaissance, where comic book movies and TV shows are constantly being shoved in our faces left and right. Not that I'm complaining. Of course, if anything, that's just job security for me, which is why this month we are doing an entire series all about superhero shows and movies. But I have to wonder if that's even the correct way to address them. Superhero movies, as if it's a genre unto itself. Surely the easiest thing to do is to say they're action movies with superheroes, or crime dramas with superheroes, political thrillers with superheroes, science fiction, fantasy, adventure epics that just so happen to feature super people with capes and costumes. Comic book writer Grant Morrison said in 2009 that he's not even sure if there is a superhero genre, or if the idea of the superhero is a special chili pepper-like ingredient designed to energize other genres. The president of Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, said a few years back that he specifically does not believe in the comic book genre or superhero genre. Surely, if the president of what is, as far as I know, the only motion picture studio which produces films about superheroes and nothing else, says the superhero genre does not exist, then it must not be a thing. Right? Well, not according to Peter Coogan in his book Superhero, The Secret Origin of a Genre, and in his essay From What is a Superhero, both of which I will have linked in the description down below if you want to go check it out. So first things first, if we're trying to figure out if the superhero genre exists, then we first need to figure out what a genre is. And the entirety of genre theory is a little bit beyond our scope for today, so for the sake of this video, we'll keep it simple and say that a genre is a system of particular conventions like plot, setting, character, and theme, which through imitation and repetition become a familiar and meaningful narrative system that can be named as such. Or, as author Thomas Schatz put it, familiar characters performing familiar actions which celebrate familiar values. There are a few factors that we can observe to see if a story form has become a genre. As we said, imitation and repetition play a key role. Superman leaped into the scene with Action Comics #1, and countless knockoffs flew into frame. Lawsuits followed faster than a speeding bullet. When you look at the superhero boom taking over the comic book market in the 1940s, you may see some similarities with today's film and television industry. Just lots and lots of repetition and imitation. Successful parody of a genre is also an indicator. If superheroes can be parodied successfully, which they have been as recently as the Lego Batman movie and as far back as the 1940s, then that shows the conventions of the genre are well understood and have saturated the minds of the audience. And heck, even just having a name helps to identify genres, especially if the work self-identifies as such. X-Men, reading The Strangest Superheroes of All, on the cover of their first issue announces the type of story the reader is in for, the same way the Rawhide Kid announces blazing Western action. Marketing themselves as superhero stories indicates the publishers were confident that the audience would not only understand what that meant, but were actively looking for such stories and the paradigms presented within them. Westerns typically showcase civilization triumphing over savagery. Detective stories solve mysteries, and they do so with familiar characters and settings. So, what conventions make up the superhero genre? According to Coogan, quote, superhero stories concern the responsible use of extraordinary power in the service of justice, end quote. Or, as Stan Lee so eloquently put it in Amazing Fantasy number 15, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Superhero stories often include the use of supervillains, sidekicks, secret headquarters, super teams, an emphasis on continuity, and so much more, but Coogan writes that there are three main conventions. Number one, the protagonist's selfless and pro-social mission to fight evil and protect the innocent. Number two, the protagonist having some kind of superpower, whether that be a mutant ability, powers gained through a science experiment or accident, or simply specialized equipment or skills that elevate the hero above the average person. And number three, the most important convention of the superhero genre is the protagonist's identity. The identity is made up of both the costume and the codename, and occasionally the concept of secrecy, although the idea of a secret identity is becoming less and less common as time goes on.
I am Iron Man.
The codename and costume work in tandem to announce a character's identity. They help to convey and emblematize a character's mission, like Captain America and Punisher, their power, like Spider-Man and Storm, or pieces of their origin, like Deadpool and Batman. While there do exist other masked heroes, like Zorro, his codename and costume don't operate in the same way that a superhero's does. See for yourself. Do Zorro's name and costume have a strong connection to either his mission, powers, or origin? Not really. Zorro's identity isn't as coherent as a guy wearing a flag calling himself Captain America. or a hero covered in scales and wielding a trident called Aquaman. It's important to note that not every convention is required for something to be labeled as a superhero story, and in fact, other stories might contain a few elements of the superhero genre but aren't considered superhero stories. As Coogan explains, this apparent indeterminacy originates in the nature of genre itself. No one example within a genre displays every convention of its genre, but all examples from a genre share common elements that form a complicated network of similarities, overlapping, and crisscrossing. Right there, Coogan cites philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein's concept of family resemblance in his discussion of games. Quote, "For if you look at games, you will not see something that is common to all, but similarities, relationships, and a whole series of them at that." End quote. This concept is applied to genres in that they don't have a rigid set of criteria that every story in every genre must meet. Instead, each story in that genre has at least some shared overlapping characteristics with other stories in that genre. Side note, if all of this sounds familiar, it's because we've discussed the mission, power, and identity aspects of comic book characters back when we asked how to even define what a superhero is. It's necessary to revisit these points because one cannot define the superhero genre without first defining the superhero. Much like a police procedural or detective story, the superhero genre takes its name from a character in the work itself. To understand those genres, we need to have an understanding of those characters. So if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend watching that video. After this one, of course, I'll have it linked below, but let's get back to the show. It's at this point in the conversation that Coogan makes the distinction between a superhero and a superhero. He does so to distinguish the protagonists of the superhero films and those of action movies. The characters in the Fast and the Furious franchise, for example, continue to show off their incredible and amazing feats of strength, skill, and dedication to family. No ordinary human in our world could do what they do. They're just too fast and too furious, dang it. But that does not make them superheroes or supervillains. Guys, I love these movies. I don't know if they're the good guys or the bad guys. I just know that I want a dozen more of them. If we consider Dom and the crew to be heroes in their stories, they could be regarded as superheroes, but they are not superheroes. The distinction here is that superheroes differ in degree from ordinary people, whereas superheroes differ in kind for all the reasons we've previously discussed. So, is Kevin Feige wrong then? Does the superhero genre actually exist? I believe it does, and if I may speculate, I think that he secretly does too. Kevin Feige saying he doesn't believe in the superhero genre was simply a knee-jerk reaction to Steven Spielberg saying how superhero movies will die like westerns. And when you're the head of a film studio that literally makes nothing but superhero movies, it's understandable if you get a little defensive. But Kevin, and I know you're watching, I just have to say, embrace it. Embrace the superhero genre. Yes, of course, superhero movies can be different from one to the next, and for the most part they are, but that doesn't mean that there aren't encompassing conventions over all of these movies. The superhero genre exists, it's thriving, and you have had more than a small part to play in that. So don't try and distance Marvel from superheroes. Own it. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this topic. Vote in this poll up here. Is superhero a genre or not? I'm interested to know why you voted the way you did down in the comments below. There's always some wonderful conversations down there. I love the great community that you wonderful nerds have helped create. Thank you so much to our patrons who make these videos possible over at patreon.com/NerdSync. The names of those beautiful people are in the description down below. If you want your name there, once again, that is patreon.com/NerdSync. I will see you wonderful nerds on Saturday for a brand new video. In the meantime, my name is Scott, reminding you to read between the panels and grow smarter through comics. And, I guess, superhero movies. See ya.